So why don't we get started? So yeah, trials, tribulations, successes of rebuilding a Drupal 7 site in 10. You used to call it migrating, and then Heather said, "You're not migrating, you're rebuilding." So that's what I'm doing. I'm Todd Smith, Digital World Biology, and a few acknowledgments so I don't forget to do it. The work I'm going to present has really been funded by the National Science Foundation of the Advanced Technological Education Division. So this is a group that funds two-year colleges to focus on technology education for the industries that make our nation competitive. It's something like that on their website. NSF is a Drupal site, so that's kind of cool. A lot of different groups we work with in that. Then also want to thank C-Doug and Andrew came in. He spent some time with me on teaching me some ways of Twig and things like that in Drupal community. Benji Fisher actually spent an hour and a half with me at a Birds of a Feather in Portland on a migration issue. So we'll cover that. And then, of course, our sponsors that have made this possible. So I'm going to introduce myself. I am not a developer, but I pretend to be one a lot of times. The sites that we're working on, a brief history of the path to 10, and then through that, the core of it is about the planning and learning, resources, data migration, things like that, and some of the experiences I've gained and some of the opinions that I like to express along the way. So my background actually came from the bench. So I'm a biologist. I have a PhD in medicinal chemistry, and I did a postdoc in the Human Genome Project where I sequenced the BRCA1 gene. So that's one of the predominant genes that's responsible for genetic inheritance of breast cancer. In '97, I founded a company, a bioinformatics company, where the theme was tidal waves of data. So that's a picture of me in Japan at Sony Studios, pushing the tidal wave back, because we did these big data management systems for DNA sequencing, and some of the graphics, trace viewer we made, and then there was a new form of DNA sequencing that came out that just sprayed data at people, so fire hoses of data, so tidal waves and fire hoses. And then PerkinElmer bought our company, and 2013 I left, started working with my wife, Digital World Biology. And so since 2014, I've done a lot of different things. So I work with biotech companies. I've done the websites that we're going to talk about. And at the bottom, I talk about my software journey, starting with automating data processing in Excel, to then working with command line on a VAX computer, to then Perl and PostScript databases and web, and finally commercial software, and then to Drupal. So before I get into it, if you want to learn about biotech and bringing a product to market, we have a game. It's a board game. It's very retro. It's called Biotech-opoly Antibody Edition, and it takes you through the trials and tribulations of building a company and getting a product to market. And the fact, do you need to know a lot of science to play? No. It was tested by non-scientists. So our websites, we have 4. And they focus on, 2 of them focus on biotech education kinds of things. Well, 3 actually with antibody engineers. And let me do this. There we go. So 3 are Drupal 7, 1 is Drupal 10, and then this is our business website. What I'm going to do is focus on biotech careers today, because that's the one I've been working on. It's the, that's the bug with that thing. Okay. Before I get into it, though, as I did this, I was thinking, okay, so I've gone through this experience, 3 metaphors have emerged for me, right? So one is the elephant in the room. Some of you have that elephant. You have a Drupal 7 site. Starshot, I think there's implications in what we do toward the Starshot journey. And then, of course, there's the Drupal experience of just falling into rabbit holes. I have some AI images of Bugs Bunny diving into rabbit holes, but then we have this cute image of a rabbit in a hole, and I'm going to have these sprinkled throughout the talk for what I'm talking about. And then the law of leaky abstractions. There's this fellow Joel Spolsky, who wrote this great series of blogs that became a book about software development. And one of my favorite chapters was the law of leaky abstractions. That is, when you're using APIs and functionality, sometimes you just got to go deep. And we have to do that often as we're starting to work with Drupal technologies. The other piece, and again, this is kind of a starshot implication, is who's the audience, right? So I said this audience for this talk could be intermediates. Intermediates move between the expert phase. You can develop some short-term expertise. You move away from a project. You forget what you learned. You become an intermediate. So you're only a beginner for a short term. It's really an initialization state. So when you think about like designing systems, designing software, it's really for different levels of intermediates that you want to create your resources and tools. And so when you think of that, minimal Drupal knowledge, you're gonna learn modules. You're gonna be working with the web. In fact, a lot of what I did up until recently, I built all of this stuff using primarily the web interfaces that were provided with Drupal and modules. And so let's get into it. Let's talk about biotech careers, because this is the site we're going to move. This site started in 2012. Fortunately, it started on Drupal 7, so I didn't have to migrate it to Drupal 7. I cut my teeth on Drupal by migrating the site from 6 to 7. And I didn't use any of the tools that we're going to talk about today. The site itself has a lot of traffic. It's used really two primary audiences. One are students learning about the biotech industry. So 200,000 visits a year come from classrooms. In fact, you can see in our logs when it's Biotech Day by the, by the patterns and the visit in the pages that they're looking at. The other half, I call them the biotech curious. We have this company database that we'll spend some time on that has about close to 10,000 companies in it, and 500 keywords that identify these companies. And so if you want to know about women's health companies, you want to know about microbiome, you want to know about cannabis biotech, we're like number one on Google because we address obscure questions. So it's a really easy way to float to the top on SEO. It has a lot of different content that focus on what's it like to work in the industry, right? So what are the careers like? What skills do I need? Where can I get an education, and who might be hiring me, are really the kinds of core questions that we try to answer. And so these are the elements that we're going to have to move forward. The architecture, the functionality was provided by modules. There's 442. That's an unfair description because some modules bring multiple modules, right? But we have about close to 300 that are active. And a lot of the layouts, that was done with panels and display suite. And then styling is CSS injector. So I have 35 different files, thousands of lines of code. There is CSS adventures in that. If you look at a page on biotech careers, what we have is, we have, you can see my arrow. So we have landing pages that will have things like cards on. So for an agricultural technician, I can click this card, go into the page on that card, where we bring together a lot of different content from a lot of different places. So we have data coming from taxonomies, we have data coming from views, we have a list that you can click through and navigate, and all of these have created kinds of interesting problems and new solutions as I've moved from 7 to 10. The company database. This is kind of my pride and joy in the site. When I got involved with it about 2016, we had a survey, and people wanted to know what companies were in their area. And I thought that's a juicy problem. So I found some resources to bring in a lot of company information. And then since then, we've grown this database to close to 10,000. And so we have a landing page. You can click on these different elements. This map here, you can click on different states. And you can go to a state and see what companies are in that state. And then with the taxonomies, there's like 500 of these pages that give you information about like what a company works on. So maybe it's biologics, but what else does it do? Well, companies working on biologics often work in immunology, they work on antibody drug conjugates, they work on a lot of different biotech things. So when you look at this page, there's 4 views that come together. And then there's filters that will apply to all those views. So I can click and ask questions about the data on this page and then recast it in a different light. We're going to move all of that to 10. And we're going to do it actually in a short period of time. I like to say this project took 2 years and 2 months. Okay, so 2 years of worry, 2 years of learning, 2 years of practicing, talking, getting ideas, and then it literally came together, I'd say, in the past 2 months, which is really quite gratifying. So one of the key milestones or key epiphany moments was I gave a presentation on this to our local CDUG group, and they said, "That's a cool site. What are you going to do about your theme? Hey, have you heard of Tailwind? You should try Tailwind. You know, Twig's going to make this a lot easier. Maybe this could be a use case." And so that's kind of what I'm doing today, is presenting this use case, and that's here today. So a couple of issues that have come up: the poor views performance. Views are 3 times slower, roughly, in 10 than they are 7, and that's impacted a couple things, and I don't want to dwell on it. There's an issue with geofields not being connected to addresses, and then I had this really annoying video sizing issue, and I should add a 4th metaphor called amnesia, because I had actually turned off some things in my info file. When I turned it back on, I don't have a problem. So, onward. So the site setup. We're on SiteGround. So SiteGround has been around for a long time, and we've been on it since 2009. You know, and you'll see these little elephants. Sometimes you'll see the leaky cheese. Sometimes you'll see a rabbit. WordPress. So SiteGround used to be Drupal, this, that, the other thing. Now it's like all WordPress. You can still run a Drupal site there, and you can still install a Drupal project. But really, they've said, hey, the world's doing WordPress. We need to do that. Starshot needs a plan to get back into these hosting providers so that they're supporting Drupal in the same way they support the other platforms. I get web access, I get SSH, I can create subdomains. So I've done all of this architecture between test and dev and production on SiteGround. Recently I started making more local instances. So I've worked out how to bring my site local and get that working. I've been doing my development on MAMP. I attended yesterday's training. I'll probably be switching to DDEV, but MAMP's kind of old school. But it's been working. And then Composer for setup and updates. So I have some notes on the side, and we'll make these slides available, so you're not going to read these all right now. So now let's get into migrating and building. So the data migration. So the first step, when I took the Evolving Web training 2 years ago, they said you got to make a map, and I said, yeah, I know, I did that when I did 6 to 7. But basically, you're going to put your site into Excel, describe the content, each content type, make a tab. It's a really good practice. One of the things that you can do when you do this kind of project is clean up things. After 10 years, there's some things you don't love anymore. And things that you might have a different strategy for. So we have content, we have taxonomies. These are all entities that have data. Again, when you get into the company profile, we're going to clean it up. We're going to have some new names. This community college hire, these used to be BioLink. BioLink doesn't exist, so we need to kind of change names, do things like that. And we might have some new ways that we have to do things. We managed all that company data, those maps I showed you, using the location module. It's gone. We use address. So fast forwarding, that resulted in 26-some scripts. One of the points I want to make, I had a slide earlier I didn't really go through. As I go forward, I need to think about how I'm going to structure things and name them. So when I'm done being an expert with this project and I forget a bunch of stuff, I come back and it's now clear to me how I approached it. So just doing simple things like in these YAML files, creating a naming structure so I can separate my nodes from my taxonomy, my images, media, these kinds of things. One of the things that I did experience, there's a lot of stuff that's not in tutorials. You can search the web. You can also, we'll get into it, you can ask ChatGPT because it's actually done a lot of that web hoovering for us and it's taken the best of /dot and compiled it and can give you some pretty helpful kinds of answers. But this is one example. I was finding that I was migrating data, and user Todd was owning a lot of stuff, and I really wanted user Todd Smith to own stuff. And there was this used to be just a really simple thing. Migration was users, migration lookup, and then that expanded to a condition, right? Images, this is a rabbit hole that's going to go into our next slide, where I had to write my YAML file that instead of reading the data from my D7 database is now going to read it from a CSV file. Why do I have to do that, you might ask? Well, it's in my comments in the green here, where it says, actually, I don't have one image field. I have several image fields, and they all have alt tags. So you go to DrupalCon, you go to a Birds of a Feather. Always good to attend a Birds of a Feather. You meet a person who goes, well, let's go look at the data. Benji's really great at saying, show me the code, know your data, right? And so the data's in your database, and so we dug around in here, and we started to create some SQL with Drush. So this is command line. You can make a file. But basically, I wrote a script that would get the data. So I have one column that has the text value. That's the data. Another column that has the node ID that was associated. Well, when I'm doing the migration, I'm going to be able to look this stuff up and connect these two things together. It was just getting this separated from the content. So we did all that. I cleaned everything up in Excel, saved it as a CSV, and then I was able to migrate. Along the way, Benji taught me about migrate debug. That's really powerful when you're doing these migrations, because you can see what your source data looks like and what your destination is. And migrate's not good at giving you informative errors. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I'll show you an example at the end, but migrate debug shows you everything. So if you're seeing things in source that aren't appearing in destination, you've got some hints of what to be looking at. It's just not getting connected right. So you need to do that. So that was an example of something that I thought would be easy was hard. This is something that's an example of something that I thought would be really hard, turned out easy after a while. So what we had is, I mentioned the location module is dead. I'm going to use address. They both have a whole bunch of different subfields that need to be mapped up. And they're about the address, the zip code, things like that. There's geocode data, but we can re-geocode it when we get it all migrated. Okay, so there was a module that was made called location migration. And that's really cool, but it's not on 10. It stopped at 9. I'm on 10. So I made it a custom module. I changed its requirement to 10. I could enable it. And then I dug through the code, and I found this plugin called location to address. And I said, I wonder what that'll do. Well, what it does is it imports all your data. so I was successful. I jumped up and down. I cheered. I gave a CDUG presentation. This is where I was in March, right? So I was really thrilled about that. But and then there was So it even got a super cool in the comments. We do have some paragraphs. How are you going to do those? The internet's full of really useful things and videos. This is a fellow who gave a presentation on demystifying paragraph migrations. I was partial to that because Smithsonian was a customer of mine. It was a fellow who had a bird collection, and they were sequencing bird DNA. Anyways, we got that solved, and then some notes from the Image Odyssey, and some things I've learned about Drush and failures. Your data is a 404, it's a 403. Drush just gives up and says, didn't work. And there you are in the middle of something. So there's ways to go forward and then look at your messages to figure out if it's important or it isn't. These weren't important. We moved on. As the last one, this is sometimes something that happens when you're doing migrations. If you clear caches, you go on the internet, people say rebuild your system. Don't do that. Okay. Back up. What were you doing? I thought I had a bug with address. I went down a rabbit hole. I made some broken YAML. Every time I cleared my caches, my YAMLs got loaded. The broken one barfed. So when I took it out, it all worked, but I did have a bad night of sleep. Okay, so theming. All right, so that was the migration. So some theming, the old versus the new way. What we're going to do is move from Bootstrap and Tweam to a custom theme with Twig. There's a lot of advantages to having your own theme. You have control. When you don't have your own theme, you do a lot of CSS to undo the CSS that the theme provides that you don't like. Okay, and so you experience the cascading style sheet thing. Hopefully your injector loads after that stuff, right? And so, and then you have, importance and things like that, and after time you can't track your CSS. So this is just a better thing to do. The things I want to talk about, so panels, I'm using Layout Builder, okay? But I'm continuing to use Display Suite for content and taxonomy, and I'll talk about that. Display Suite is a module that I had in 7 for helping me with displaying content, right? And it's actually, it's a very convenient module. And then the view pages and so on. So one of the things, why Tailwind, right? So Tailwind is actually pretty cool and powerful, and when you have it set up right, your development really speeds up. And so what you do is you type these utility classes in your HTML. And so this is just some code from a twig, but this is what I type. But what I get is I get CSS, right? So I get all these CSS classes. Some will say, well, your HTML gets all polluted with classes. Well, your HTML gets polluted with classes anyway. This time you know what they mean, okay? And I can tell you that if you do this for a while, you start to understand these utilities better than you understand abstract class names that might create something. Now, it's not a replacement for all of that. Sometimes, you want a button, you want a button to look a certain way. You're going to maybe make a button class in a Tailwind file and then do utility classes, right? But it does improve a lot of things, I found. So how do you get started? Remember, I started all this stuff from zero, right? So you go, where's a good Tailwind tutorial? Well, Tom has one on Tom's web stuff, and he goes through all of the things. Some things I learned. Make sure you install Tailwind in your theme directory, because if you don't, you're going to regret that. There's some things that can come up. Oh yeah, this is a good one. If you're doing this, uncheck that box on performance about aggregating your CSS and JSS, because a lot of things are not going to work. And then with the watching, you can really kind of automate this process. So his whole thing was to create a nav region, which I did, which I broke, which I'll come back to. So the other things he goes through that are really useful is setting up your settings.php, which you should do in your settings.local PHP as you get from the beginner intermediate course to the more advanced intermediate course, right? But this guy here, for settings local. But when you have these things set up right, then what happens is when you inspect a page, you're going to see all your twig files. So these are the files that are controlling the layout and the HTML on your page, right? And then when you mouse over things and then you read up the stack, you can figure out what twig has this element, and you can see it, highlighted in the page, highlighted in your inspector, and then you can go through and start editing that. The other thing is live reload. Super powerful. I think, Andrew, you're going to tell us about some other alternatives to this, right? So yeah, this is where I'm at. This was a great blog for setting this up, make your theme fly, and it does. There is some configuration. There's a bunch of NPM installs. But once you get this set up, and it wasn't too painful, I think my gotcha was in this area here, then you add a live reload URL source in your HTML twig, and then if you take your CSS and start to manage it as SCSS, it gets picked up here, and now everything's automated. So what it means is I can type in one window, hit save, page reloads, and I see the changes, right? The old way was you do this, you go over, you clear caches, you close your eyes, you wait and see if it loads, and that really slows you down. So that was really good. And then there's just a bunch more. So Tailwind allows you to pre-configure things. I'm really into grids, so I can set up my grid classes here, but then I need to control the different sizes of those cards. Some cards should be 300 before the wrap starts. Some should be only 200, that kind of thing. And so you can set this up, and then you can set up your repeat autofill. And so what this does for you is if you have a page and you make it wide, you want your cards to just fill in all that space, and then shrink it down, and they don't jump to one side, they don't jump to the other. I've seen that on WordPress sites. It makes it just a really smooth user experience. The way I test mobile is I shrink my page, right? Because it's just got to be smooth. Yeah, and then you can pre-compile things. All of these list types. This is a very long list because people like to put outlines into documents. So you want 1A, you want all that filling in, right? Tailwind helps you do that. And then there's a package.json. These are your commands. So when you type npm run watch, and this guy's running, and you do your saves, you get that automatic refresh. When you fat finger something in Twig and you get the white screen of death, then you need your other window for your Drush CR so that everything is close by, and then you can keep going. So that's just how I set things up. And then again, always clear your caches before you freak out. Sometimes it's something you did. Page layout in Twig. So as I mentioned, I'm using Layout Builder for my custom pages. So these are going to be landing pages, pages that we might want to style and lay out in different ways. But a lot of our content is structured. It's structured at the database level. It's structured on the page. And so I want an easy way to make those pages. And Display Suite does that for me. So first, I had a lot of experience with it, so it was easy for me to go, yeah, I know how this works. I could do this. The Twig naming and the field access gave me a really consistent design pattern. I can do a dump and see all of my fields on that page right at the top. So I have a process now for making a new page because after this site I got to do 2 more. So things I like about Layout Builder, you can make a different layout for every page within a content type. Display Suite, it's the same for every content, for every display in that content type, right? So I can organize it. I can have a display called a big card versus a display being the full content. And this is what the twigs look like now with Display Suite. So I only use 1 column. People give you 2 columns, but then you're going to fight with the 2 columns. So I like 1 column. If you want things side by side, use flex. You get all the benefits. With Twig, you can say be flex on a large screen and just be not flex on a small screen, so you get your responsive pieces like that. And so this node big card controls all of these guys, right? So I have different content that I need cards for, and then the file names, help me identify the content. With a challenge being like this is a display view. Right, display mode, and this is the content, right? But the hint is this says full, so I know it's a content, right? But I don't get that, as clean a separation between my teasers and my content as I like. When you're looking at these twigs, they're going from really high specificity to general, right? So all the way to the HTML. So like if you put the node ID in, you're just going to apply that twig to that particular node. I gave it a yuck because the problem with the ID in the name is, let's say you go and rebuild your site. All your IDs are going to change. So that's, but you can't use the name because, they would be name -0, whatever, because you can have things with the same name in Drupal. So it's just, so I focus on these. One of the things I was able to fix in Twig, taxonomy, Andrew's fond of saying this, opinionated. Drupal can have opinionated code. The first thing when we were working together was the opinion that all of my taxonomy, so this is a taxonomy term with icon display. But when I put it in here, taxonomy, Drupal says, well, you get the title with it, and that's going to be H2. So we have these big giant titles over these tiny images. So you could write some CSS that could say hide it, or you could put it in Display Suite, and it'll say what title. You put it in if you want it. Okay, so that's one of the things I like. But we always had an inconsistent order, and this has been going on for a long time on the current site. And it's really pronounced down here where you have PhD, certificate, master's, PhD, bachelor's certificate, right? So what's that about? What I really want is I have them sorted in my taxonomy page, high school certificates. This is kind of the progression in education. And I want this to match here. So we can do that in Twig if you can figure out the field, and we'll come to that. But if we put in some sorting code, we can do that. And so, so we first find our Twig, and so these are controlled by this field, minimum education. And in this guy, I don't have the sort yet, so that's going to come up. Yeah, so right here, I take and I'm going to sort them by the taxonomy weight value. So you know how when you take a page, it's alphabetical, and you start moving things around, and you can say show weights? Well, those will find their way onto your content. And so what you learn is you use a tool like dump. It'll dump all of your content on that page. It can be the items, it could be a specific thing in there. So here I've set this field, these elements in this field to a view mode, and then when I display it, I get these numbers, right? So this is telling me I'm sorting things correctly, right? So that's how you debug it. The view mode is the icon, and so when you do dump the items in your list, you're going to see I have 3 arrays because I have 3 icons here, and then I open up these arrows and I can start navigating this. So it's really powerful and cool, and I can see here that, oh look, icon is view mode, so this must be items 0 content view mode because this is the high level. If I'm in the loop, it would just be item.content, okay? So, okay, where's my weight? Oh, it's way down here. Okay, so if I follow this up, it's part of values, which is part of this thing up here with this number in taxonomy term. So will this work? It's a quiz. Any bets? No, it's not going to work, right? Because there's a different way to approach it. So I asked ChatGPT to help me out, right? So after, first I went on and I was asking Google the wrong questions, clearly getting a lot of rabbit holes. But eventually we got to this thing where it said, okay, if you take this taxonomy term and set the term, you could do name value. Oh, I have a name underneath that value array, values. It's a hashtag, meaning it's associative array of names and their values. And under here, I have the name, right? So if I have the value of that name, this will work. Well, that told me that really what I wanted was the weight value. Okay, and that's how I got to that. So everything's there. You just have to figure out how to get it. I've used ChatGPT a lot. These are my queries from August, September, in the past 30 days. I'd say overall it's pretty good. There's been some clear losers. Sometimes it just strings variables together with dot notation, and you just go, I don't even have that on this page, right? But it has been a lot easier than Googling and digging through /dot. So here's an example where it really did help me. So on these pages, I have that career page I showed you. I have these lists, right? I call them select lists. You click this link, you're on that page. It's going to show up as active. If I click animal technician, I'll go to the animal technician. And, Well, in D7 views, put a little class in there called active. And that was really neat because you could style it, right? It's gone. So instead, I know what page I'm on. I know the node ID for that page. I know the node that this link points to. If I can connect those two things, then that's active, right? So how do I do that? Well, I gave ChatGPT a query, gave it some ideas, gave me some ideas. Those didn't work. I then gave it a clarification. And this is what's fun. It says, got it. I mean, it's like a human, but, it's a computer. It's just doing pattern matching with pre-filled text. But once it understood the problem, it said, well, you need a PHP function. And I'm like, I don't want to write PHP. I forgot to put a leaky cheese on this one. And then you put that PHP function in your theme file. And this is my debug code echo. So when I turn this on, I'm going to see the node ID with all of these as well. And so problem solved. And now I have a design pattern because in my views, I take machine name and I give it select list, and I put that name together. I can now do this 5 more times. And then I needed to do that. And so here's the code where these are put together. The row, content, row, dot, underscore entity this time. We'll kind of pick on twig syntax a little toward the end here. So that problem was solved. And then the views, I can name them according to, again, the view, the display of the view, the machine name of the view. The only problem is none of this appears in your inspect. It's a bug. You got to go to this to the Drupal site where you get the naming conventions, and then you can do that. So, but yeah, so here's an example. So I got a format. Here's my big card, and then I can use a class. So in my views view, I found some cases it's better to put logic in a high-level twig. Other cases, it's better to have a twig specific for the thing you're looking at. And it was more so that I could kind of look at these and not proliferate twigs that have like one line for something. And so when I do that, then I can, in that views, I can ask the view, what are you? And it'll say, oh, here's the grid for this, here's the grid for this, oh, here's the flex for this, right? And so then that's all set up in the twig with Tailwind classes. And then, and so that's the control logics. And so we also have another case where, and I was learning about this morning. Actually, I did this right, because if you take and make this the link and this the link, you have 2 links in the card. And if you get the accessibility scanner, the one we heard about this morning, it was the first talk, you're going to get a violation because 2 links going to the same place and the same thing is not a good idea. So I make my cards a link. This way I can put alt tags in and that sort of thing. You mouse over, it turns blue, it pops out of the page. But sometimes I do have links in the card. Like here I have, but these are all different, right? So you can go to the company, you can go to its taxonomy, that kind of thing. And so that structure is controlled in the views unformatted. Word clouds, this was another fun one. We're big on word clouds because it's a great way to see how much content is associated with a word. And I'm going to accelerate because we're getting close to the end. So I have taxonomies and contents. We use tag clouds. Tag clouds made the journey, but they're only for taxonomy. So, and then in D7, I put PHP in the database. Not supposed to do that. But that's how I did this word cloud here. And then when I presented, they said, maybe you can do that in Twig. Well, it turns out you can. So, of course, and again, this was helped with ChatGPT, but I can. It's a two loop problem. First, you have to take your field and count how many things are in a field, and then you use these to get your minimum and maximum as you loop through all of your fields. And then for my min and max, I can have a loop that will then set the font weights according to the count, right? So, so I set a minimum size and a maximum size. And oh, by the way, you can tell this is ChatGPT code because it gives you comments for everything. But that worked out great. And now I have the tag cloud problem solved for both content and taxonomy. And then just, one of the things that I've kind of struggled with a little bit is the syntax around getting your data as you start to navigate those trees. And then there's also the dash versus the double dash, the underscore versus the double underscore. These are not always easy to read, especially if you're making your text small so you can see a lot of code. But, that's kind of what that's at. And then, a few next steps. So we're actually, we're like content complete and very close to being production ready. There's still some things to do, like this dreaded nav bar up here. I got to come back to that and come up with some ideas. But the big things really are configuration management. So what I want to get to is this streamline where I can go to check out my site, build it, migrate the data, and then see everything, and then delete it and do it again, right? Because as we're doing this, remember your other site's being used, and content's going in. So even though you figured out all your migration, that's just for your final step, right? And then there's some UI work, and then this production checklist. So this is a leaky abstraction in a way because you do have settings that you've done. You've tickled things in several files, and you need to track those on a computer piece of paper, right? But you need to have a checklist so you get these things turned off. There are some strategies I've learned, like Composer with the --dev option will make a dev group in your Composer file, so your dev modules don't have to go to production with you. Some of the things I've loved, important modules made the journey. I've really only felt like I've had two missing modules: views pivot table and token embed views. And then Tailwind and Twig have sped up development. And and overall, I have fewer modules and less complex content configuration. I can actually look at my file system and my website and know what I did and how things are structured. And my productivity has really increased as I've understood these patterns. Some of the things I don't love, address and geofields. So in location, the geolocation was with the address. That was one row in a table. What a really novel concept. When you put these in two different tables and separate the data, crazy things can happen. So I'm looking at all the employers in the world that work on biologics. If I view by those in the United States, if you notice Hawaii has 3. These are all Bayer. Well, when I click United States, I now have 30. Why do I have more companies? Well, these are all Bayer because Bayer has 10 US locations. So it's showing me the geocodes, not the addresses, right? Because that's what gets displayed on this map. And so that's a special problem. This is Drupal 7. It's still 3, okay? I did have to get a module called views distinct because I did have denormalization at the taxonomy level, which is not unexpected. You see this a lot when you join taxonomy together. But the other thing is this 174, 300, the numbers are the same. So quality control. So the other is yes, Drupal 10 is slower. Yes, we can cache, but it does make a few things harder, like seeing the world map with 13,000 locations. That just doesn't load anymore, and it loads in a few seconds on my live site. However, and so this is an example from the Drupal 7, few seconds, and then this just after it's done this a few times, the data are cached and now it's fast. But that's a painful thing. Somebody has to die for the greater good to get your data cached. So it's just going to be a deeper problem to solve. It's not unsolvable. I don't want to give that impression, but obstacles create new opportunities. So there's choropleth maps. So you can get all the world GeoJSON data for all the boundaries. You can find these things in JSON files. You just got to learn how to migrate your JSON data into Drupal. And you can pump this stuff in, and then Leaflet will show you these boundaries. And so if you make a content type called geography, and it holds information like how many companies are in a region, and or you can use a view to do that, and puts a color in there. You can make a heat map of the world, and then using views and the Leaflet module, you can then actually put all of this data into your pop-up. And so now what we're seeing is California, we're seeing how many employers are in California, we're seeing the top 3 business areas they work on, and you can see how this changes as you go around the world, and it's kind of cool. And so what we've done is we've taken a 13,000 instances and turned it into 200 instances. And so this page goes boom, without doing anything fancy, and you don't have to have caches. Of course, we'll have caches, but yeah. So that's So again, obstacles. You just gotta go. We need to rethink this, right? So version 1, we're gonna with this, and then the other problem I'm gonna solve by not having that view filter with the others, and just say this is what they look like in the world. Here's the data in your area. Last thought though is the big elephant in the room is Drupal 7, right? So if you look at world stats, more sites are on Drupal 7 than any other, and we're seeing this go down. And I think this is really important for all of us to think about, because, Drupal depends on continued use and success, and people like us staying committed to it. But, this transition was not, a walk in the park. I kind of enjoy these challenges. So, I've been able to get that done. And so I just wanted to kind of close that, with that thought, because I think that is a big elephant in the room. And then, thank you for your time. You can connect to me directly, LinkedIn. We can talk after, because I didn't save any time for questions. I apologize. And but these are the key references that were sprinkled throughout the talk. I will make these slides available, because there's a bunch of code in there, and the code is, that's text you can copy. There's some screenshots for things like directories, where it was harder to just paste it into Keynote. And then some of the key modules that I've used, so for the maps, taxonomies. A TVI I do want to call out, because one of the things you experience with the new taxonomy is, how do you get that content there? And it's not a taxonomy view, it's a content view that's reaching to your taxonomy. This module says, what taxonomy do you want on these taxonomy pages? And so that's super, super important. And Display Suite is just, cleverly named DS. And then this guy, I didn't make a point of it, but I'm really thrilled that I don't have Google controlling my maps and my geocoding anymore. And I can take my credit card back. So that's what I wanted to share.
Quick question, did you ever have any custom modules on your 7th site?
Yes, one I didn't talk about, and it's just a few lines, because my intern hates PHP, but it's for our job board integration. So we have a job board, and so we use that API, and then we format the data to look like it's in the site. So that is a custom module, but yeah.
But not very many, just a few.
That was it. Migration, all of those are technically custom modules. Yeah, and there's a lot of resource on setting those up. Yeah. Oh, but I will have more custom modules now going forward.
Yeah.
Because I got a couple things that just, the views embed, these are nuanced, but when you're looking at the careers page, I have how many companies, and I could do it with a view, or I could do it with the token, how many companies are in a particular career area. So like if you're doing biomanufacturing, you want to know about biologics companies, you want to know about these things. So again, a student can look at this and go, oh, there's a bunch of companies, and then go to that map. The token taxonomy node count tells me how many nodes are associated, not how many company profile nodes are associated. So all of a sudden you're looking at your data going, why is there always like 2 or 3 or 4 more than what I have over here, right? So that I might have to do a view or do a module if I want to stick with the token.
Because over time, ended up with a lot of custom and trying to get away from that in core.
Yeah. So there could be, I didn't emphasize it, but a lot of the modules for me that went away dealt with control logic. Like if I had this field and this field has content, show it, not this, right? Those things I'm all doing with Twig now.
With
Twig, because the if statements.
Yeah.
So all of that went away. Modules that did formatting kinds of things, those all went away. So I replaced it with the theme piece. Yeah. So I don't know what your custom modules do, but
all over the map. Too many hands touched it over too many years.
Yeah.
Use by the PHP record.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
There's a module for old modules.
Yeah. Well, students worked on it, vendors have worked on it, staff have worked on it.
Well, it's some work.
that's, but